episode 11 of Sanj Surati Talks. We have had a lot of fantastic feedback with regards to the music business focused podcast that we've done over the last few months. And I've got an up and coming music genius who's created a really fantastic product who's going to be on the show today. Please welcome to the stage, Jake Lazarus of Kiki.
It's good to be here.
So Jake, there's people that are listening to this show. I've read a lot about you for two reasons. One, I know the PR agency that supports you guys, but two, I read that fantastic article about you guys in Forbes. There's some people who are listening to this podcast who don't know much about you. If you could give us a brief background about who you are and what you do, that'd be really cool.
I am a music entrepreneur. I'm 23 years old. This is my third startup in this space. Kind of got here by mistake. As circumstance would had it. Dropped out of university of Warwick after about 18 months. It wasn't really for me. Didn't really provide the type of education that I was looking for. And so when I was at school, what I was doing with a friend of mine, James, was we were working on an internet radio station. And by the time I kind of got to uni and I was getting a bit bored, that was doing really well. And so Universal Music became involved in that project. And that was really the first time that, you know, I'd assumed that what we were building had value and that people were interested in it. And so since then, been involved in various startups in the music space and advertising space, in the technology space. And that's kind of a very clinical overview of how we've got here. That doesn't really represent my personality at all. I'm really into kind of my nerdy, weird and wonderful things. Super nerdy about tech. So yeah, I don't really fit the mold of an entrepreneur, and particularly not a music tech entrepreneur.
We'll talk about your past in a second, but just with regards to it leading into Kiki, what is Kiki?
So Kiki is a platform that's about discovery. It's really about finding your next favorite genre. We looked at how the existing streaming services worked, and there's a big focus by some major players about discovery, but you're finding new songs by the same artists that you know, or you're finding artists that have a similar sound. And we thought it's getting a bit boring. It's been done, and the excitement of music has been lost. You know, the days where you would be in a vinyl store and you would hear something so totally different to what you've heard thus far, or you'd be at a festival. I mean, those days are long gone, but you'd be at a festival and you'd wander past a stage, you know, from a sound that you've never heard before, or the radio, for example, which used to be the biggest way to discover new music. So all of these kind of older ways of discovering music have been replaced by something quite clinical and mathematical. Kiki believes that music isn't maths. And so you can't really recommend music without appreciating the culture, the credibility of the person making that music, etc. Yeah. So what we do is we learn about your listening habits. And then rather than showing you the same kind of music that you already like, we've mapped music. So we'll show you genres that you never knew existed and we think you're going to like. And really the fun of the job, the fun about working with Kiki and using Kiki is in the diversity of the music that's on there. So there's no pop, there's no Ed Sheeran on there. Great though they are, they're already well represented on existing platforms. But if you want some lo-fi or some future beats or some Senegalese techno or some ambient or some rough and tumble industrial techno from Nottingham, then this is the place to come find it.
Wow. Me being an audiophile, you know, I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, started off with vinyl, then cassettes, then CDs. I think the streaming platforms are quite liberating and a fantastic platform to listen to music. What I've noticed is there's not much context to the music that I'm listening to. Like, you don't have that experience of sifting through a record store, finding something that's really difficult to find, that's specific to something that I may or may not like, and really exploring music as a medium from a perspective where you're actually engaging with the vibes and the world of music in a way that's not being pushed onto me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the similarity that I'm always drawing it's like it's like a video game. These huge open worlds that you can do anything with. That's like Spotify, and that's like even Netflix to some extent. But video games have these different mechanics, things like nudging, things like breadcrumbs, things like quests, which provide some kind of pathways and structure through all of that huge library. Um, and the streaming platforms haven't really done that part of it, and so it can be fairly daunting as a new user of those platforms, or someone who doesn't know that much about music or film even. You spend a lot of time scrolling. It's the classic on Netflix is, what do you watch? You just scroll for the first 5 to 10 minutes. And the average person wouldn't appreciate how much work goes into those algorithms on Netflix side, but they still haven't really got it right.
Yeah.
And the way that we're addressing that is really not from a tech perspective, it's from a content perspective. So rather than having every song available, it's really picking the kind of sounds that we think people are going to like. So it's more focused on content curation than about trying to retrofit a technology to it afterwards, because it's an absolutely huge challenge. People would be fascinated to know what Netflix's total tech spend on just the discovery element would be. And
what
it's
is
probably
that?
similar with, well, I don't have that to hand. It would be a huge number. It would be more like than my whole business is worth, like per month potentially.
Right.
You're probably talking tens of millions a year easily on like just server costs without even the people to do it.
Wow.
So they see it as an investment. What we've looked at is, that could work. It's not working currently, but we think that the best bet right now is limiting the amount of content just to the best stuff. And that means that it's really easy to use. It's easy to navigate. You're not scrolling for hours. You're hopefully going to like our first or second recommendation. And so the time to value, which is a super nerdy term from like a sales perspective, is way shorter. You're really getting what you came for way quicker than you would on another platform.
Amazing. And so just with regards to Kiki having that perspective and what you're offering to the customer from a value point of view, how did you discover that discovery needed to be addressed with regards to the process of how people find music?
It comes from like a kind of collection of anecdotes personally, and that the team have had over the years, and it kind of speaks to most people's personal use of music, which is a lot of people use social circles for music discovery. The kind of most frequent thing that we see in our market research is friends recommending music. But obviously music is an incredibly subjective cultural output. It's so unlikely that you're going to like what your friend likes. The same as if your friend likes a certain food, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to like it. And so the over-reliance on social discovery really made it clear to us that, discovery as a concept wasn't really being done that effectively. There's loads of anecdotes from university life where, having control of the aux, which is, who's playing the music, becomes so contested and sometimes quite a political act. Anyone in a British university right now will know the concept of pre-drinks and after party, and knowing what to play at the right time is a really tough thing. You have DJs who have spent their whole life doing this kind of thing. It's not it's no mean feat. It's a bit of an art.
Oh, absolutely. I find some of those discussions in those environments, particularly in nowadays, can be quite heated, because everyone can curate quite quickly.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think what existing platforms have done, and to some extent social media, is that they've made anyone can be a curator. It brought the kind of barrier to access right down. Anyone can create a playlist on Spotify. The question really is about the credibility of that playlist and how good it is. And if everyone's a curator, you end up with like a kind of fast food of music, where you get fads and you get trends, a little bit like the TikTokification of music, which I would love to discuss more. It's my current most favorite thing in the world. But it means that, if you look at the charts now, a lot of the charts is from meme culture. You know, I think at least a third of the charts right now is either from TikTok or meme culture. And one of the reasons for that is that music's become a little bit like fast food. You know, you've got producers creating something so that it goes viral on social circles or on YouTube or TikTok.
Yeah.
And so what Kiki hopes to do it's a massive ambition, is to kind of reset that and be seen as a countercultural movement against that. You know, here's a group of people that love great music with heritage, with credibility, from all over the world, not just from a specific type of person or a specific demographic of person or a specific country. So that's our kind of overarching mission.
That's amazing. So the platform launched in May and you've got like over 500,000 users now, is that right?
Yeah, slightly under. It's slightly under 500,000.
How do you feel about that? Because I heard your advertising budget initially was just minuscule. Like, how do you feel about that growth?
It validates the market for us. It's easy to get kind of drawn into the numbers, but for us, that's obviously just a start. It's just a stepping stone. The total market is 1 billion plus. So we see 400 something thousand as like, okay, this is, this shows that what we're doing works.
Yeah.
People are interested in it. But it's neither here nor there at our current stage. That's kind of what I'd say. I mean, I'm thankful for it. The reaction has been very good from our listener base, but just to put that in context, that is like Drake dropping a song one day in. Drake releases a song. After the first day, he's nearly 1,000 times bigger than us. So there's a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of space here.
Did I just hear you compare yourself to Drake?
Well, I would compare myself to Drake releasing a song in the first 30 seconds. My last 3 years worth of work would be equivalent, yes.
I was just joking, buddy. So just with regards to Kiki as a platform, what are the differences of your streaming service compared to the current streaming service? And I know you've touched on it, but how do you define the value of someone using your service compared to others?
Yeah, the interesting thing is we're ad supported. We're not subscription supported.
Right.
And that really is an interesting play that hasn't really worked thus far. The reason why it's great for the listener is, number one, they haven't got to pay $9 a month. And so in certain markets, in Africa, Latin America, we're suddenly very competitive. But really what the thing is that it means the onus is on Kiki to keep the user there. Once you've paid your $9 a month, no one cares what you do on their platform, right? There's no incentive for them to keep you there or to keep you engaged.
Yeah.
When Kiki is getting paid per stream, so to speak, not only per stream but per hour of listening, it's in our best interest to not only provide the best content, but to kind of service it at the right time.
Yeah.
And that structure puts a lot of pressure on us to really do what we said we're going to do. So that's kind of the most obvious difference. I guess the second thing being the kind of genres that we do. If you go onto our site, there's a huge list of genres. I think there's 180 on there.
Wow.
A lot of them you wouldn't have heard of. I still haven't heard of about 15-20% of them, and I'm one of our most avid listeners for testing purposes. And that list is continually growing all of the time. So we're seeing it as it's not a fixed list. If a certain genre kind of comes up, we've just seen synthwave come up. We've seen different parts of lo-fi in the kind of instrumental hip hop scene come up again. So we're kind of sticking with the times, following the trends really closely, and in some cases setting some of the trends. And so that for me is a big difference. It's the difference between a fashion house like an LVMH type fashion house and a Primark, where you just have everything at your disposal, every color under the sun of every color t-shirt. And for us, we're the opposite of that. We're more of a premium brand, and we're only picking the things that we think people are going to like.
How does that curation work?
So we have a team of curators. I would like to think it's probably the best job in the world. I would hazard a guess that could be true. So these guys, a huge range of experience. There's some from record labels few people like uni dropouts, and they get paid to listen to music all day in a genre that they love. So their job is to scour the internet, scour Mixcloud, SoundCloud, YouTube, go to see live music, and then work out really, is there an audience for this? Do I like this sound? What's the future of this sound? Do I like the artist? And then make that value judgment call on whether we're going to take the content or not. So it's a super cool job. There's currently 7 people in that team. The team should go to 10 in the next few months.
Wow.
And it's a really hard role to hire for, because you're saying, well, does anyone in London know everything about West African music? It's a tough one. There's not 1,000 people jumping.
Yeah.
So it's a really kind of nerdy role to hire for.
So I was at Music Week for 3 years. I was part of their digital team when digital was kind of like a new word. And we had a talent manager who's basically like the guy that would curate the playlist each week. And his job was to kind of sift through all of these press releases that were coming through the post box. I mean, this was back in the day when people were still posting CDs, And he was like, one, he was a really cool guy. 2, he had the coolest job ever because everyone just wanted to love him because what he wrote could be the be all or end all for that record that week. But also he used to get quite frustrated with it because it was just so time consuming.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important role in that position. But even here, they're responsible for the sound of that genre. And some of the briefs are very broad. Like one of the briefs is UK bass, and UK bass is an often overlooked genre. I mean, definitely now by major platforms, and it's really shining a light on the non-London sound. Things like Bassline from Nottingham, the sound of Sheffield and Portsmouth, and these are very much underground movements that don't really have. It's tough to Spotify and get a list of playlists for these kind of genres. They exist, but it's done badly. So one guy is responsible for the bass music of the 2nd to 50th biggest UK cities, for example. And so it's incredibly important to make sure you're shining a light on all of it in all the right places.
I think that's fantastic because you're searching for talent, and giving talent an opportunity to express itself to a huge audience.
We're looking for talent in places where people haven't been looking.
So how does the licensing work on your platform? So
there's one side of our licensing, which is a radio license. So it's done through PRS and PRO in the UK, and Sound Exchange in the United States. The key thing that we do in terms of licensing is we pay the people who put the mixes together. So let's say you're a DJ, you're getting paid by Kiki in the same way that the person who wrote the original track is getting paid. And currently, there's no one else doing this side of licensing and monetization. Wow. So we're really at the forefront of monetizing every part of the creative process, not just the parts where the major labels sit.
What challenges have you faced with regards to that style of licensing format?
What, the radio side?
Yeah.
I guess the biggest manifestation of that is that we need track lists for all of our content. So let's say a DJ does a mix for us. It's 2 hours long, and they change the song every 1 minute. You got 120 tracks.
Wow.
And so what these guys are used to doing is, they'll do a set live, they'll put a mix up online, and they won't tell people what the tracks are. And so it's impossible to find out who owns the rights to the tracks to then make sure they get paid.
Yeah.
So it's constantly this fine line between, okay, we need to pay the people who put the work in for the tracks, but also the actual task of finding out who they are is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Just to illustrate, I think we have about 200 hours going up a day of content.
Right.
So the manual track listing effort is absolutely huge. And as that scales 10 to 20 times over the next 3 to 6 months, you can see how much manual work is required on the track listing side to really make that work. So that's really that's really why no one has done this in this way, is that the amount of manpower required. And we're looking at technological solutions to it. There's a few companies doing things like Shazam, where you can listen to the mix and auto track list it.
Yeah.
There's a few companies in China that also are leading the market in it. For us, we've not seen anything convincing thus far for certain genres. So that will work for pop and hip hop. If I had some indigenous song from Brazil, it's not going to work. You know, if we had some bedroom lo-fi producer, it's not going to work. If you've got a future beats DJ who's playing 2 songs at once, it also doesn't work.
Right.
So what we're currently developing is a solution that could automate this entire process, but it's a much longer research and development project for us.
Your platform's not even a year old, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been building it for 3 years, but it's not been live or kind of, you know, had any kind of credibility for it until more recent times.
I work with a lot of tech businesses, and a lot of the young tech entrepreneurs that I meet are really worried about launching something because they're worried about the challenges that they're going to face. And what you've just highlighted there is that these challenges teach you things. It helps you to understand how the landscape is shaped, how to kind of get the best out of that.
Yeah, I think there's a really good Elon Musk quote. Not that I'm going to fetishize him on this podcast, but there's a quote that he's done like that. I mean, it's the equivalent of trying to learn to box by just getting punched in the face. That's my quote with it. And eventually you learn how to block one and throw one, but normally you just get punched in the face all day. So yeah, definitely learning, you know, it's taken us a long time to really work out exactly where our niche was, how to do certain things.
Yeah.
Looking back now, it's completely obvious how you do these kind of things. But it obviously takes some time to really come to those conclusions. And a lot of people try and force, you know, a product fit with a market. Probably the biggest cause of startups not necessarily working is, you know, having tech before product. Oh, we've got this really good AI idea, this really good blockchain idea. Rather than having a problem that they want to solve, they kind of put the solution first. And so keen to avoid that. That's why it's taken a little bit of time for us to kind of find our footing and see how we can fit into a really competitive landscape.
So refreshing that you say that. I work predominantly within the fashion sector, and there's so many tech companies who come to the fashion space saying that their product is going to save the fashion industry, and it never does, because as you say, they approach everything with the solution as opposed to trying to understand what the market needs and trying to figure out where their product is going to add value to an industry.
It's honestly one of the most frustrating parts of tech. They tech entrepreneurs and the kind of tech industry views itself as these like white crusaders coming into the Jerusalem of fashion or music and teaching them their ways. And it's just never worked out. I think every time someone has pitched to me, you know, for investment or a product to solve something in music or music production or fashion or consumer product, it's just never, you know, they come and say that your world's falling down and, you know, they've got the bricks to hold it up. It's just not true on both parts. It's a really tough conjecture for them to actually sell, which is why most of them don't work.
I mean, it's awful. I mean, I've been in this space 20 years and I start to see these notions appear on social media, etc. And I'm like, oh God, not another one. And I'm not the only ones thinking that. It's also the industries that are thinking that as well. Like, oh God, not another idiot trying to force something onto something they don't know anything about.
Yeah, it's a classic. Like you take an industry you don't understand and you bolt the words blockchain, AI, machine learning, data-driven intelligence, get funded by the American VCs, and then you're off, and then it doesn't work. Such a big percentage of the market is that. And even that's something that we have to live with. A lot of people, you know, if they're looking at our tech, they say, well, you know, why don't you use machine learning, for example? Machine learning is the go. Why don't you use blockchain? It's like, well, actually, what we're using is better than that for what we need.
Wow.
You know, so it doesn't. A lot of people like over intellectualize or over spec their tech just because it sounds good, and it can kind of bamboozle people who are non-technical in music or fashion, for example. But yeah, I think it's kind of falling on deaf ears a little bit now. I think the kind of days where you could blag your way into a few big clients has kind of subsided.
Yeah, as I said, I've been in the space for a long time, and it's just a conversation that never dies. But then that's just the nature of the hustle, I guess. You're 23. You've brought a product to market that is starting to gain traction. How did you get into this method of industry?
Yeah, so as I said before, it's kind of circumstantial that I went to quite an odd school. I'd kind of put it down to my schooling, although not in a positive way. I went to a school in Barnet, which is like one of the top schools in the country. But it really is focusing on academia, your maths, your further maths, your physics, whatever. And I really wanted a more creative outlet. And so I got into studying art at school. One of the 4 or 5 kids that studied art. Haven't really got any natural talent in art. Can't draw a picture of my own face that I see every day. I wasn't able to replicate with a crayon. And so really what I got interested in was kind of learning to code to animate things. So I got into animation. And so I kind of picked up coding from when I was about 15, 16, not because of school, but through my school projects. And then at the same time, a friend of mine, James, had started this internet radio station in his bedroom in North London. And I was helping him initially, sort some of the basic tech out. But eventually we ended up building quite an elaborate, what I guess is a content management system that I would do in the evenings and the mornings and the lunch times. And that was really my first kind of, foot into understanding how certain parts of the music industry worked, specifically things like influencers and kind of the realm of pop, which that platform was in at the time.
Yeah.
And so both of these things kind of coalesced. I started building things for fun, seeing when in 2 or 3 months, could I build this and see what it was worth? And I did kind of a few smaller projects. And then it's kind of culminated here in a much larger effort, really to take everything that I've learned from different sectors and really build a product that addresses some of the issues that we faced before. When we put together that radio station, to get my content online, why did it take me a year to build something to get it online? Why did no one offer a platform to do that?
You started to get noticed by Universal as the product started to gain traction.
Yeah, so Universal took an interest in Wizard around the time I was at university. It's not really something that I was dealing with per se, but they took an interest, and it really showed that actually what we're doing here has value, and actually what I built has value. So that was the story with Wizard.
How old were you when that started to stir?
I think James was 17. I think I was 18. Yeah.
Wow. And how did you feel about that?
It was an interesting one. I was kind of trying to juggle. I was juggling university with a few other projects at the time, and I wasn't really having the best time at university. It felt good. I mean, it's kind of my reaction is going to be the same to when you asked me about 400,000 users. I'm just so maybe overtly ambitious with what I'm trying to do that I'm viewing it as more of a stepping stone. And so actually when they come up, it kind of pass by uneventful. I'm just always thinking about what that next thing is. I'm not particularly fussed about, the journey as such. And so all of these things which have been, sometimes life-changing, sometimes have revealed actually what you're doing has value. They've often passed by, with little fanfare from my part.
Did you feel like the conversation was going to change your life?
No, I didn't feel like that. It's been the response to that, and the response to selling businesses since then has always been mixed. When you talk to people that aren't entrepreneurs, you get things. People say, "Oh, it's life-changing." People say that you're lucky. And for me, both of those things aren't true, because I'm always positing that if it can be done once, it can be done again.
Yeah, I got you.
And so I viewed them more as an affirmation that, the direction I was going in personally and what I was building, could go somewhere great. It doesn't really, having a major label get involved with something, it doesn't really align with my personal views on how the music industry should work, which maybe also made it less exciting for me.
No, absolutely. I think there is an assumption that these music industries are these big, fantastic machines that can take your idea and put it into another place. And when I say idea, I mean, a tech idea or a music artist or whatever. And in reality, they're just kind of vessels that can be beneficial for you or your business, but they also might not be. And a lot of people don't understand that. I think particularly when you're a young artist, you assume the way to succeeding is by affiliating or signing a deal with one of these big corporations.
I think you're right. I think that it's exactly the exact same conversations about being an independent artist or going to a major label those conversations, which are accelerating now thanks to Spotify for artists and all of these platforms, is the exact kind of internal discussion that you would have if you were selling something to a label.
Yeah.
And labels certainly have positioned themselves really well in the market as the go-to solution for so many things, even so far as doing brand partnerships for their artists over the last few years. And I think particularly in the kind of genres that we're in the electronic music side, that facade is falling away. You're getting a lot more independent artists themselves investing in things. You're getting kind of music-backed ventures starting things. So I'm kind of hoping that kind of monopoly and kind of hegemony on we're the place to go if you want to make something work in music will start to fall down.
I guess the only difference is there is a heritage there of conversations. There is a music infrastructure of people who are connected, and when it does work, it can be beneficial. But as you say, you need to kind of take each step with a pinch of salt and, take those rose-tinted glasses off, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm not anti-label per se. What is frustrating is that the services that label provide should be available to everyone. There should be other ways of accessing those services in a way where there's equal value exchange, rather than signing away your entire future, either as an entrepreneur or as an artist. There must be a better solution to that.
Yeah.
One of the things that Kiki would like to do is, if you're a DJ or a podcaster or an artist, we don't want the rights to your music. That belongs to you. We're going to help you monetize that in the same way that a record label could do, but without taking, the IP from you. And so I think the onus now is on tech entrepreneurs and music kind of enthusiasts to build a kind of network of services that can over time replace some of the more traditional music industry, which a lot of people, moan doesn't work, but a lot of people also not really doing anything about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a tough one to moan. These guys it's easy for the big guys. It's easy for Jay-Z and Kanye and Drake, to pull these mad deals from Apple, or these mad deals from the major labels. But for a smaller artist, you come to the table with no leverage at all, and you're not going to get a good deal. And so one of the things that we'd like to do at Kiki is present an alternative route. And I'm way off that. I've got a few years until that, is viable, but that's the longer term thinking of the project.
I love it. No, it's brilliant. And we need more alternative routes and more disruption in all captains of industry. With regards to your tech businesses, so you built this thing with your friend James at university, is that right? Or was it college?
Just before, during secondary school.
When you were in secondary school, and then you started to develop a couple of other tech businesses and you sold them. Tell us about what those businesses were and what that was like.
Yeah, so my kind of interest in tech have always been looking at industries that people write off. Industries that people think, there's a really big player here, you can't come into this space. And those are the kind of ones that need the most attention. There's the biggest gaps in. So one of the things was an e-commerce tool. One of the things was a fraud detection. They're kind of like very basic, kind of one function, one solution. Fraud detection, for example. Quite a lot of stuff in the ad space. So one of the kind of crafty pieces of tech was a piece of technology that would work out if your advertisement was being viewed or not. Seems pretty basic, but if you're looking at how advertising works, if you're paying for video advertising, even if they're not watching the video, you're still charged for video advertising. It might not be in the active tab. It might be, hiding behind another window, for example, but they're still paying for a video advert. So what this piece of tech did was then charge you for an audio advert instead of a video advert, for example.
Right.
And interestingly, it wasn't taken up that strongly, because all of the platforms that could have implemented it obviously make more money off video adverts. And so there wasn't the financial incentive for anyone to kind of pick up the idea. It's something that Kiki is going to do for the brands that we hope to work with.
And you sold that product?
We sold rights to that product, yes.
Wow. And so you built that from scratch and commercialized it ultimately?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the products. Tell us about some of the other products.
One of them was like file upload. So methods of uploading large files when you have kind of rubbish internet.
Wow.
So when I'm calling them products, they're very simple, kind of like plugins, or they're not multifaceted products that I'm launching every 3-6 months. They're kind of single purpose, single function things that people have tried but just not done that well. A lot of the times companies have these capacities, but it's not, they keep it within the company.
Yeah.
So a lot of banks, for example, had the fraud detection thing. A lot of advertising companies had the video audio detector, but there was no incentive for them to license it out because it was their competitive advantage. So some of these things don't, it doesn't have to be new. It just has to be available to people that couldn't get it before.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm really interested in with tech. Everyone's looking for the next best thing.
Yeah.
But some of the things that are already here, and maybe you can use it to a different application, or you can make it more widely available. That is an equally valid thing. We haven't all got to be building rockets to Mars. There's a whole lot to do, in the middle bit.
There's this strong term about we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you need to try and reinvent the wheel because the wheel doesn't work. It's got a flat tire or something.
There's an interesting culture amongst kind of entrepreneurial circles, particularly the online kind of entrepreneurial Instagram pages and that kind of thing, where people get very focused on, kind of more engineering than, software innovation. Really, if you're digging a hole under the ground like Elon Musk is, or you're building rocket ships, that's obviously where a lot of the attention lies. But the most profitable industries are the kind of infrastructure things that hold it together. And one of the examples I always give is the company 3M that pretty much make adhesives and like materials. And they're like substantially larger profit-wise than the two companies we just mentioned before. Mm. So even it's normally in the kind of unsexy, mundane areas of life where the most money is being made. And what I've attempted to do from a tech perspective is, you can have your sexy products and projects. Like Kiki is a really interesting one. It's exotic to some extent to the average music listener. But you also have your projects that, make easy money, that don't reinvent the wheel and just try and apply an existing principle to something new.
With regards to those products that you've made and that you've launched and you've commercialized, what have you learned from those experiences before you went into Kiki?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think when I was focusing so much on just doing one element of something, a single problem, single solution, what I was failing to really get was the kind of roll-up value you get when you build a kind of coherent product. So if I'm just doing, the video and audio detection, I might be able to charge, £3 per 1,000, let's say. But if I had built more functions into it, I could have increased the cost of that product greater than the sum of its parts. What we've learned from that with Kiki is that Kiki, we've done everything ourselves. We've added value at every single part of the chain, from rights management to curation to advertising to audio upload to how round our play button is to the image for hip hop. So we've really spent so much love and care over every part of the process. That is really in response to, previously having been done, just this very small part of something where you can't really roll up the value that easily. It means you're spending a lot of time building something that doesn't eventually, make you the kind of money that you hoped for.
Right.
Because you can only charge so much if something only does one thing.
Yes.
And what we're hoping with Kiki, when you're talking about having an actual startup, the valuations in this sector are crazy. The EBIT multiples are crazy. And so you really need to have a product that is better than what exists in all angles. It needs to be competitive on all fronts, not just one front.
Right. Okay. Yeah. With regards to Kiki in its current stage, are you still trying to define where the value is?
It's a good question. I think our mission is to create the best experience for our users. Once the users are here, there's lots of value that can be created for partners and for them. One of the things that we've been looking at doing is going into ticketing as an example, something that didn't necessarily become that obvious until recently, which is you've got your users, you know what they like, you know who they like, and you know where they are. So if a certain DJ is playing a gig in their area, why not message them with tickets for that gig, for example?
Wow.
So that kind of proactive ticketing is something that hasn't been done that successfully before. And it's an incredible value add for them, for independent music venues, for promoters. So by owning everything, by owning all ends of the pipeline, we're able to create value for other people in ways that no one is able to do. You know, the value of Kiki to a festival promoter, if it has 2 million young Brits using the app and knowing exactly what genres they like and how to reach them through the app, is an incredibly valuable proposition for them. It's not immediately clear where the value comes from, but certainly by building a product that people love, there's obviously loads of additional ways of increasing value to everyone involved. The focus now is just crafting that experience.
What I like the sound of there is that you're starting to add value to the artists that are on your platform. You're giving them more value. You're giving them the opportunity to maximize their exposure, to make more money. If I was a new artist in this day and age, I wouldn't know how to sell tickets to my concert. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly that. I think one thing, when you're talking about monetizing for artists, lots of online tools project that they can change the artist's life by doing online, you know, get for every 100 streams, you get this amount of money. The average artist is never going to get that amount of streams to make that headline figure.
Yeah.
And so the kind of task is, okay, we'll get our payment systems done. So we're giving artists a fair share. It's not going to change their life. It might pay, you know, the bills. What we're looking at then is how can we add additional value? How can we, you know, where are artists making their money? Is it from merchandising? Is it from touring? And then trying to help them in those areas of their life so that even if Kiki's not directly paying you, it's still responsible for a big percentage of the money that you're making.
Yeah.
So just trying to find these kind of secondary and tertiary ways of helping artists. And it's really easy to overpromise and deliver with artists. I've done it on previous projects. The whole industry has done it. You know, the industry is built on that. The equivalent of the American dream, I guess, being signed to a major label and, you know, touring around the world. It's just not feasible for most artists. And so what we would like to do is craft an alternative path where it's still feasible to be a mid-tier artist, even in genres that aren't as big as pop.
And the key thing really is understanding how to engage with your customer in a seamless way. And when I say customer, I mean the person listening to the music. And, you know, if you're an artist, you know, you're thinking about a million different things, including making good product, making good songs. So if there's a platform that allows you to maximize the opportunity to, you know, engage with your audience and monetize that, you're basically producing a paradise product for the music industry.
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. I think one of the reasons it's taken even 3 years from concept is, you know, it's such a big task to do everything we've just gone through and whatever else is possible is a huge task. If it was easy, someone would have done it. Someone would have done it before. Not only is it about offering, you know, everything that you can to creatives, it's also about a narrative. It's about changing a narrative. It's not about just giving a list of 30 things that you offer someone. It's about crafting a narrative about excitement and the creative process and production and, you know, equality and diversity and everything like that. So it's a huge task. It's a huge task. And, you know, righting the wrongs of the industry is what every disruptor would like to do. And that's something that we're looking at doing across everything that I've just gone through.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I really, really value your openness to discuss those aspects of Kiki. Just with regards to Kiki, so how many people work within the headquarters?
There's about 15 of us here. It was actually, we're currently working half remote, half here, just following the zeitgeist of coronavirus currently. But it's normally about 15 people. Normally downstairs we'll have 5 to 8 different creatives using the space for free. So some people might be, you know, using the decks or the podcast studio that we've got on site. So it's normally very, very, very busy. You
launched the platform over COVID-19, like right literally at the cusp of lockdown. Was that a conscious choice or were you already planning on launching in May?
We were planning on launching about 2 years ago. It's been something that's been kicked down the road so long. But obviously, you know, you get to a deadline, the tech's not ready, the content's not ready. So it wasn't a conscious decision to do that. It was kind of circumstantially that's happened. What were your thoughts the day before it went live? To be honest, the week before it went live was a bit of a blur. We were working about 20 hours a day, I mean, my coding partner, AO, I think had actually slept in the office for the previous 4 to 5 days. So
Wow.
it's one of those things where, it's one of the things I said it before, like it kind of passes by these moments. When you're so kind of in the thick of it, hard to see the wood for the trees.
How have your expectations differed from how you felt before it went live to how it's gone live?
Yeah, it's interesting. You spend so much time theorizing about a platform, being super nerdy about play buttons and dimensions and making all these decisions, and you release it, and you know what, the average person doesn't care. That's really what we found. We could ship things quicker and not spend as much time fussing about the details. And that's something, as a creative myself, that I wouldn't like to admit, but we've spent hundreds of hours having discussions that no one would even be able to identify the end result of that, because it's something so small. And so you always want to give love and care to every part of your product. You want the experience to be seamless, but at times it might be better just to get the thing up and out the door quicker. So it's a fine line, and certainly that's one of the first things that we learned is people, number one, never use it how you expect they're going to use it.
Yeah.
So we're now in the process of making some changes to make it easier to use for certain situations. A good example being, if there's a genre of music that we all know because we're all music heads, and we're wondering why no one's streaming it, is because no one knows what it means. And there's been 5 or 10 genres that we've got where the content is incredible. We're making these recommendations, and they're appearing quite daunting to users because they've never heard of the word before. Sometimes it's not even written in English.
Wow.
And so there's certain parts of it, we've designed for ourselves, and we really need to take a step back and design for the, someone who's not as musically educated and nerdy about it than we are.
It's such an important thing to kind of think about the perspective of your user, because the assumption is the perspective is the same as you, but it's not in anything, whether you're making a film, whether you're making music, whatever type of art you're creating that you identify with, that's part of your identity. Once it's out in the ether, people perceive that thing in billions of different ways, and understanding that, I think, allows you to move forward quicker. Otherwise, you're just kind of going around in circles.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some discussions that, looking back now, make absolutely no sense worth having. Discussion whether in our analytics engine you can have the city first or the country first, or the country first then the city in brackets or whatever. It's like, we discussed that for days.
Yeah.
So, and there's countless examples where we could have moved faster, and the end user wouldn't really be none the wiser. So certainly when we're going to do our kind of next stage of product development, which we're doing now, we're moving a lot quicker than we had done previously.
Jake, we're just getting towards the end of the show now. I just thought I'd ask you one quick question before we go into the outros. What advice would you give to anyone that's interested in becoming a tech entrepreneur? It's
an interesting one. I would say it's not going to be very helpful for people, but I would say don't listen to my advice. Don't take the common tropes. There's so much like fetishization of entrepreneurs. I'm going to do it the same way this person did it. I'm going to do the same way Elon Musk did it, or Steve Jobs did it. I'm going to study lean startups and read all these books. I'm going to go and do an MBA in business. No successful entrepreneur goes that way. I've never met anyone that's happened with. I've only met people who are trying really hard to emulate unsuccessfully. My advice is only really applicable to my circumstance and the really weird way that I've got here. I think the advice, taking all of that as it is, the advice is just to get really good at something. If you want to start a company that's going to solve something, you've got to be the absolute best person at what you do, and that can be across anything. You haven't got to be an entrepreneur to do a startup. You could be the best person in beauty or fashion or in a certain type of music. If you're the best person at what you do, if you know the most about drum and bass, come to me and I'll give you a job. If you're the absolute best person in that field, then the value you're able to add value to people, and the business will follow. People getting into being professional consultants and COOs and COOs and all of this stuff, that all of that is a mechanism to make the ideas work. You're not an entrepreneur if you've done an MBA and you've read some books and watched a film. best way is just to go out and meet people and actually get something done. And you can worry about the operational structures afterwards. We're a company fundraising without a CEO. Seems odd, but it's just natural. For us, those terms don't mean anything. And so I think people get weighed down so much with the concept of being an entrepreneur, the concept of founding something, or the concept of being someone, rather than just working on their skills.
Yeah,
it really is, at the end of the day, the only value anyone has in this capitalist system.
I really value that, and I'm sure people listening to this really value that as well, because there is a lot of murky water out there, and people are promising people a dream, and the reality is the only way to get to whatever it is you aspire to is just to work hard and roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty.
Yeah, I think calling it a dream is a really good point. It's sometimes a nightmare. I've never met anyone who it's just been a dream for. Not only you have no support network as an entrepreneur. It's not like it's not like you're an employee where you get paid every month. You sometimes don't get paid. You're taking all the risk. So everyone focuses on the reward. These huge, buyouts that can happen, and these cars and houses. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of sleepless nights. And in the UK, every fourth Friday is payday. Every fourth Friday, the last Friday every month, there's hundreds of entrepreneurs sweating about whether they've got enough money in the bank to clear payday.
Wow.
It's definitely a thing. And certainly during coronavirus, it's even more of a thing. So, it's easy to kind of fetishize it and make out like it's all, glorious. It's great fun. Also got its quirks to it. And it's worth going into it knowing exactly, what the full side of that is. It would be too good to be true. If you could have no boss, start your own business and everything works fine. It just doesn't work that way. I don't think it ever has for any company.
If it was that easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah, everyone's trying it. Maybe everyone thinks it's that easy. But if anyone listening certainly know that. It's Tuesday now. 3 days time, I'm going to be up all night trying to sort payday. That's just the intrinsic. Doesn't matter how much money you've raised. There's these still tasks that are so mundane that you have to do as a founder. Yeah. Doesn't matter how creative you want to be. You still got to do your taxes. You still got to do your employment stuff. You still have a boss. You still got your investors and your employees. And it's not quite as liberating as you might think.
So on that note, Jake, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
I guess LinkedIn is probably the only public way of getting into contact.
Okay.
Although I'd stress, if you're going to add me on LinkedIn, please send a message first. You get some people that are really interesting, people that just say, I want to connect with you. Like, we know that's not a meaningful interaction. If someone's up for like a really interesting conversation about something that we've talked about, or has a business idea they want to chat through, that's really interesting for me and any founder. If you just send us a invite that says connect, it's just not gonna happen, unfortunately. Yeah, one of the things with the Kiki site is obviously, we don't want people messaging our curators.
Right.
We want their job to be untarnished. There's no one applying, sending their stuff. So your anecdote about, people sending CDs through, we don't have that on our own. We don't have anyone submit stuff. We want to go and find stuff.
Okay.
And so we've naturally made it hard for anyone to contact us, which probably will change. It sounds, now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds somewhat ludicrous, but the best way of getting in contact is going to be through LinkedIn.
Jake, you've been absolutely awesome. I really, really value you giving us your time here. I'm sure people listening to this would have got a lot of value out of it too. Those of you listening, if you could please share this, that'd be great. You can use the hashtag Sanj Surati Talks, or one word. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please be good. It's Sanj Surati.